knows how much distress disunity causes in the body. He says, I want to help you do your very best to preserve the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace in your congregation. If you care about the good and pleasant peace of your local church, he says, then you might be reading his book and also kind of following on his blog that he does regularly. He says, my personal story, and I'm not going to say a lot about this because I don't know how much you're going to share in your time with us this morning. He said, my personal story includes, as I've shared with you before, much rejoicing and some deep sorrow. This is important for you to know, the person that's standing before you this morning bringing you the Word. In January of 2014, I remember this very vividly, my son Josh passed away suddenly from heart failure. In May of 2016, my wife of nearly 42 years, Nancy, went home to be with the Lord after a battle with cancer. I have a surviving son, Joel, and five grandchildren. I've been learning to be content in all things through Him who strengthens me. And then to add joy to that's the last statement, in March of 2017, I was delighted to marry for the second time. God gave me Jan, another rock star bride. What a wonderful term to call your bride, with which to partner in gospel ministry and share life together. And they make their home in Clearwater, Idaho. I didn't know there was another Clearwater anywhere but Florida, but I'm glad you've got one in Idaho. Now just a little bit of a personal testimony. That's the formal testimony. About 10 years ago or so, roughly, Curt, you might remember the time, we were beginning a Florida chapter. Actually, we were kind of initiating a Florida chapter of the Spurgeon Fellowship. Pastor Chris Haddon, who now pastors in Orlando, or actually Lake Mary, was kind of the spearhead for that. And he brought together a group of Reformed pastors from around the area. That's where I first met Pastor Curt at one of our fellowship meetings. I remember, it may not have been the very first time we met, Curt, but it was one of those first times I was bringing the message to one of our meetings at Markham Heights or Markham Woods Baptist Church, and you were sitting there. And I was bringing the message out of Colossians chapter 1, verses 24 and 29. And Curt was sitting at a table where normally the pastors would sit around while one person would give a morning devotion and speak to us. And when he opened his Greek text, had no English Bible with him, but the Greek text, I knew I was in trouble. And I had better be on time and on text with what I was doing. So our friendship fostered after that, so evidently that went well by the grace of God. But since there, we've been able to develop a friendship and a camaraderie, and it was with great joy just this past May, because since he had resigned or retired from Grace in Orlando and had moved, I had not had much communication. I followed him a little bit on your blog and things like that, but had not seen him. And we walked in to our Fire International Conference in Texas, and Chris grabbed me and says, look, there's Curt. And I beelined to him, and we had dinner together during that conference and shared many times. And during that time, I had the opportunity, knowing that he had written the Peacemaking Church and had been familiar with it, to ask him if he would consider perhaps his next visit to Central Florida, kind of making his way to the East Coast and being with our congregation. And he said he deemed it an honor to be with us this morning, and we are so glad that you were here. Before I introduce him, and he's going to introduce his beautiful bride, Jan, to you, I want to mention the Peacemaking book. When you came in, you might have noticed that there's a table in the back with these books. This is actually, I don't know whether I would consider it part of a series, but it is part of a series. Some of you might remember years ago the Peacemaking Pastor, the Peacemaker, which was one of, I think, the very first title. And there was even a brochure that many churches have had out on their material tables when you come in with their church, which is a systematic guide to how to resolve conflict and to walk in peace in relationships. In fact, we had them back on our table for a long time. I think I may be out, and I'll have to get some more and put those out. But what Curt has offered to do today is at the end of the service is to, with these books, offer them to us at $5 a book. And if anyone would like for it to be signed, he'll be glad to do that for you. And I've been through this book over the last few weeks since he gave it to me. I went through it immediately and then went through it again over the last few weeks. Just the stories, the application, The context and use of Scripture is just phenomenal in here, Curt. Thank you very much. And so I commend this book to every single one of you. And if you'd like to bless him beyond the $5, feel free to do that. But immediately following the service, he's going to make his way to the back to the book table where we have, I think we have 32 copies of the book. So there should be enough for everyone back there. So without taking any more of your time and allowing you the opportunity to tell us about your bride and what she's going to do, let's welcome Curt Heffelfinger to our congregation this morning.
Thank you, brother. What a kind introduction. Thank you. I love the doctrine of providence. God controls all and brings together for his matchless purposes all things. The woman I'm about to introduce came to Orlando Grace the very day after Joshua died at 35 of heart failure. I had talked to then my bride, Nancy, about the fact that I needed to be with my people, but that I would stay home if she needed me. But we were wired differently in some ways. And she said, no, go. And so I did not preach. That was Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. One of our elders preached on James 4, life's a vapor. And I just poured out my heart. And that was Jan and Marcy's first Sunday. And they had come looking for a church with elders and some other criteria. And they said to one another in the car on the way, wouldn't it be great if we just found a church that was a family? And the elder that stood up to speak that day said, opening the service is going to be different today. If you're a guest, we apologize, but we're just going to be a family. And at some point in that service, Jan said, Lord, am I here to intercede for this pastor and family? Little did anybody know that God had FedExed her, special delivered, to Orlando Grace, knowing that 3 years later, I, whom in desperately need of a partner in help, given all my weaknesses, would put her on my heart after my bereavement process had progressed further. You never stop breathing. I wasn't sleeping at night because I could not get her out of my mind. I'm more than willing to be content if the Lord so shows. So I figured I'd rather go down in a ball of flames than keep not sleeping. So I asked if we could meet, and I said, would you possibly consider getting to know me as someone more than your pastor? We prayed about that for a while, and God just drew us together. And with that comes enormous gifts in music. And there is a baby friend in our double wide in Sykes, Idaho. And she's a songwriter as well. And I asked her if she would play today before I preach what is my favorite tune that she's ever written, Welcome Back to the Throne of Grace. Babe?
What he didn't tell you, of course, is that when he asked me if I would consider praying about him being more than just my pastor, he basically had to pick me up off the floor. And that sense has not left me completely even yet. This song I wrote because I have been a believer since college, but the struggle, the ongoing struggle that I have, even though I understand that I am saved by grace and nothing else, I have still struggled for years at times with the feeling that, yeah, but God is disappointed with me now, because I'm just not that, I'm not as fruitful as I should be, and I don't share my faith the way I should, and this and that and the other, and I just have struggled sometimes terribly with that, feeling like God is saying, oh, good grief. So I was praying about it one time, and I was reading in Hebrews, at the end of Hebrews 4, and it talks about drawing near with confidence to the throne of grace. And for the first time ever, I thought about what a beautiful name for this throne, that it's a throne of grace. It's not a throne of, it could have been called any number of things. A throne of encouragement, could have been a throne of conviction. That would have chased me. A throne of so many things, but God calls it a throne of grace. So that was such a blessing to me. I wrote this song. And if I don't put these on, I won't be able to even sing it. Are you feeling like a disappointment? Like you should be stronger? You should get it right. Have you listened to the accusations? The accuser whispers in your head at night. It's time to come back to the throne of grace and trade your labors for a resting place. Come and see the mercy on the Father's face. Welcome back to the throne of grace. Are you buried under expectations? Do you feel unfruitful, broken by your sin? Do you carry the guilt and condemnation? Are you trying to earn Jesus' love again? It's time to come back to the throne of grace and trade your labors for a resting place. Come and see the mercy on the Father's face. Welcome back to the throne of grace. It's time to come back to the throne of grace and trade your labors for a resting place. Come and see the mercy on the Father's face. Welcome back to the throne of grace. Welcome back to the throne of grace. The Father's waiting at the throne of grace.
Let's look to the Lord. Our God, Father of us all, over all, in all, and through whom and for him are all things. How thankful we are that it's a throne of grace, favor, a mercy seat, that there is therefore no condemnation for us who are in Christ Jesus. And that upon that great and glorious day, where we become your own, adopted as children, you're placed in one body, where there is one Spirit, whose hope is the joy of our calling as followers of Jesus, who is one Lord, who has given us one faith, one baptism. It is with that backdrop and perspective we gather today in this local church as your outpost of kingdom mission enterprise in Daytona Beach, and ask for your help. I ask, as I have countless times, assist me in the task, and that you would undertake for these who hear, that the word would become implanted in their souls with meekness and tenderness of heart, that word which is able to save and sanctify. We'll put all the praise back and honor for you in Christ's name. Amen. Little disclaimer. There are enough impediments to what we're about to do for the unseen realm wars against your joy in the preaching of the word. I bring extra to the table. And you may have already noticed the difficulties with speech I have. I'm a tongue cancer survivor. 2005, surgeon took a tumor the size of a large egg off the right side of my tongue, along with about 30%. Ironic, huh? You preach. My first question to Dr. Spector was, will I still preach? I think so. Fast forward 10 years, osteoradial bone death by radiation. I had radiation and chemo. Fractured my mandible. And in 2015, in February, while my wife was fighting ovarian, my first wife, Nancy, was fighting ovarian, in Miami, in an 8.5-hour surgery, they removed half my mandible, and there's now a titanium implant running from here to here. Subsequent 3 more surgeries, thank God for Dr. Marsh in Miami, and I'm on a cancer-free, totally rebuilt, we call it robo-jaw, or they have their race, but I will work hard for you at my diction. The surgeries have created swallowing and saliva problems. We used to call the relay race the front row, the splash zone.
It still is.
Yeah, we had ponchos available for people. So I'm warning you if you want to move to a safer place. I take some meds to try to help with that. I did my undergrad studies in theater, my BC days. And of all the shows that I had the privilege to take part in at Penn State, my all-time favorite was Your Good Man, Charlie Brown, musical. And I was cast in the lead role, a typecasting, I think, Charlie Brown, the blockhead. And the theme tune in the musical, you may be familiar with it, is called Happiness. It unpacks what makes for happiness Charles Schulz style, Among other things, finding a pencil, pizza with sausage, amen to that, 2 kinds of ice cream, and a bunch more. But my favorite lyric, Linus and Lucy team up in a duet, and they sing, happiness is getting along. Happiness is getting along. It most certainly is. Jesus proclaimed just that in Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers. You're familiar. Sermon on the Mount opens the Lord a bullet point, rapid fire, kingdom of God economic study of what makes for happiness if you belong to King Jesus, the Beatitudes, the Blesseds. And I just want to zero in on one, the 7th. Blessed are the peacemakers. So, good news. I've traveled from the famous potato state, Idaho, and if you can imagine the Panhandle out there in the Pacific Northwest, it comes down and then it separates out to get down to the desert. If you were to take the Panhandle and break it off, we're right there in the middle where the severance point is. Beautiful Clearwater River Valley. I bring you greetings from Trinity Reformed Baptist Church, a brand new Fire Fellowship of Independent Reformed Evangelical Church. We are the only one in Idaho. We're starting a movement. And my people there know that I'm here. They're praying for us. And it's just, again, such a privilege. But I want to work hard today and labor for your welfare. For much is at stake. Why do I say that? Well, consider the rest of the verse that tells you why. If the name, the label peacemaker can stick on you, there's a marvelous consequence and blessing. 4 reasons, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Now, here's what I take that to mean. Oh, yeah, Heffelfinger. I know him. He's certainly not perfect, but I know he cares about peacemaking, conflict resolution that honors God, and helping others do that. Yeah, there's enough evidence of that in his life to convict him of being a Christian. I want that. I'm assuming you want that, or you wouldn't be here today. And it's a big deal. When you embrace that identity, peacemaker, and strive to act like one, again, nobody does that perfectly. Anybody love conflict? It's just one of the least favorite things on the planet to me. And yet we all deal with it. But when you make it your business, with God's help, to be a peacemaker, then I personally don't think you more reflect the character of God than that. Now, that's a pretty astounding statement to say that's the most significant way you can reflect God's character. Maybe disputable, but I don't know. Why? Because God is called the God of peace, right? Several places, who sent the Prince of Peace, King Jesus, with the gospel of peace to make his enemies friends, reconciling them through the shed blood of Christ on the cross and making them into a family. One body, Jew and Gentile. That's why I say this is such a specific and significant aspect of your happiness, and that you will work hard at taking along, because as opposed to being what I call a peacemaker that runs from conflict and doesn't deal authentically with it, or the peace breaker that tends to blow up conflict, to climb up on Ken Sanders' slope to be a peacemaker. And I take Jesus to mean with this that on the last day, if that's your ethic, it's in your DNA spiritually, then you will warrant a well done, good and faithful servant, a child, a son, a daughter of God. It's too great a contradiction if you're not. Kids in the faith and the one we worship. So much is at stake. So my plan today, I hardly ever preach topically. We're doing Genesis in Idaho, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. I love that about fire, churches like ours. But I'm going to do a peacemaking 101 for you today. What I've sought to do is to distill years. When I took over at Orlando Grace in God's Providence, we had come through our second, count them, second church split. The first happened 5 years before that. 1/3 of the congregation departed. The second one, I was the music director at that time, waiting on the Lord for what he had for me. And crisis in the leadership. Nobody knew what was happening. One day, Pastor got up, wrote his resignation, sent it out, and that was that. A massive exodus began. And they turned to me and asked, would you be an interim pastor? And eventually I became the third pastor teacher. And hallelujah, passed the baton to a high-octane, rock star young man from Mississippi who is now pastoring Orlando Grace. Place is gone bonkers, and we just thank God for exceedingly abundantly all that we could imagine or think. But I said, if we can pull it off by God's grace and have that baton pass and have it be peaceful, I want us to work our tail ends off as a church at developing a culture of peace. And inculcating in every member, covenant member, and attender, a commitment to this ethic. Ephesians 4:3, eager to preserve the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. And I'm going to share with you 3 principles. There's a whole lot more I could offer you. But I'm going to give you the 3 that I think are my sine qua non, my bottom line go-tos when it comes to this subject, which I'm passionate about. Would you open your Bibles first to Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 to 3. It will be on the screen for your convenience if perhaps you don't have a copy of the text with you. Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus, chapter 4. I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. How? With all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Now, let me ask you a question. What's something at which you really want to excel? Some gift, passion, skill that, man, I'm going to do my best at that, and I work hard at it. Now with Jan, I think it's pretty obvious. It's music and piano and singing. And I work to propel and promote this because we have a zeal in my house. After supper, she goes to the piano, I go to the sink and to the dishes. She plays and sings. Yeah. I do the dishes. I have the gift of dishes. She has the gift of music. It's a lovely complementary arrangement. Seriously, for me, and this, I hope it's good news for you, this preaching thing. And that's a top shelf, as I'm sure it is for Mitch and the elders here. And it better be, right? We don't have to turn there, but 2 Timothy 2:15. Do your best. Paul's talking to Timothy in his pulpit in Ephesus. Do your best to present yourself approved to God as a workman who does not need to be ashamed. How? Handling accurately the word of truth. These kinds of verses keep us awake at night, especially on Saturdays. Do your best. Study hard. Give it your all. Dig in. Pray through it. Labor over it. Make sure when you step into this spot on Sunday, you're not ashamed. And that the people of God who gathered, the sheep of his pasture, to be fed, go away stuffed. Do your best. Now, why am I laboring that? Most of you don't have preaching at the top of your Excel list. Some of you, I know, have music there. But all of us, as followers of Jesus, there are things in the Bible that tell us about, in light of who we are in him, new creations, that there are things that we should do for him. Gospel-shaped people do these things, but there are few of them that hit a top shelf, high priority, number one commitment emphasis. And this is one of them. Verse 3, eager. Wow, I love the NIV's rendering. Make every effort. Same Greek word as in 2 Timothy 2:15. Do your best. Make every effort. Give your all to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. You and I don't make unity. God does. It is Psalm 133:1 says, a good and pleasant gift. Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell together in unity. And my bet is that some of you know all too painfully the converse, how bad and unpleasant it is when brothers dwell together in discord. The unity and peace of crosswalk is God's gift of the Holy Spirit to you. You don't make that. But you're charged to guard it, preserve it, keep it by the way you act, especially in the throes of conflict. Now, here's how I read this contextually. Chapters 1, 2, and 3, right? Paul is in the indicative. Who are we in Christ in all that he has done for us, including reconciling Jew and Gentile, talk about conflict, into one body. And then when you get to chapter 4, verse 1, he pivots. He moves from the indicative to the imperative, as he often does with one of his classic therefore, right? Here's how we should then live in light of what he has done. Now, don't let this be lost upon you. Where does Paul start? He starts with a corporate dynamic. He starts with peacemaking, how you behave and get along in the body of Christ. Now, if I'm writing this, thank God I'm not, and didn't, I would have started with personal purity. And put on Christ, deal with your sin, grow in him and flourish in him. No, Paul doesn't. He gets there starting in verse 17. He starts with relationships. He starts with this unity thing. This is a high priority. Make every effort. Hebrews 12:14 puts it this way: strive for peace with everyone. Be a champion. Make this a high priority. And that's my aim today. I want you, every one of you, here at Crosswalk and wherever else some of you who may go to church and you're here as guests, to make the good and pleasant peace of your church a priority and go hard after its preservation. To get peacemaking your best effort as a member of your church, perhaps like never before. And there are three things that I want to bring to you again. But let me just say this. This is not just the job of that man, or that one back there, or the other elders I've met, or the deacons. Do not leave that up to your leadership alone, though they will take point. It's all of your responsibility. To the degree that you all own it organically here, then this precious gift will be guarded. All right, three things. One, overlook offenses magnanimously whenever you can. Two, engage others lovingly whenever you must. And then we'll pick it up a notch at the end. Mediate disputes effectively whenever you do. One, overlook. Overlook offenses magnanimously whenever you can. Turn to Proverbs 19:11. Proverbs 19:11. Book of wisdom, discretion, insight. And verse 11 of Proverbs 19 says this: good sense makes one slow to anger. Any trigger fingers in the house? Good sense, wisdom, discretion, insight makes you long-fused with your bride, married men, with your husband, married men, with your roommate, single person, and so on. Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. The word glory is the same term used in Proverbs 4:9. She, wisdom, will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. I think I have an image. Here you go. This is the imperial crown of Queen Elizabeth in Great Britain. Proverbs 19:11 is suggesting if you have control of your temper and you overlook, what does overlook mean? You magnanimously, unilaterally, summarily say, that was offensive, probably wasn't having a good day, I don't have to talk to him about it, I forgive it. Don't even deal with it. That's what this text is suggesting. When you choose that forbearance in the face of insults, Scripture says, that's like you just put on one of those. A beautiful tiara, a spectacular crown. It's a beautiful thing. The aim, three things to notice here in the verse, the aim is good sense. Again, wisdom. Book of Proverbs champions that, you know that. Good sense, this is 16:22, is a fountain of life to him who has it, but the instructions of fool is folly. Listen to me. Wisdom is a moral issue, at least in large part, won or lost on the battleground of relationships. Let me say that again. Wisdom is a moral issue, won or lost on the battleground of your relationships. Proverbs warns about this. Ready for some text? Just listen. 10:12. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. 12:16. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. 14:29. Whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly. 15:18. A hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. 23. It's an honor for a man to keep aloof from strife, but every fool will be quarreling. 29:22. A man of wrath stirs up strife, and one given to anger causes much transgression. Takeaway is just so plain. The greater your distance from genuine spirit, the greater you are given to outbursts of anger, you have that quick trigger finger, then the greater the distance in your life from genuine insight and discretion. Take it from a recovering rageaholic. There's no wisdom in being short-fused. And the antidote is charitable, merciful, magnanimous forgiveness. Overlooking offenses, again, is in the face of wrong, saying, I can deal with that right here on my own, in my heart, and forgive, and that's not going to bother my relationship with that brother or sister. It takes, finish the verse for me, it takes a love that covers a multitude of sin. Multitude. Let me translate that. A lot. Many. More than you can count. Can I put it another way? Do not be easily offended. You can put up with a whole lot more than you give Jesus in you credit for. Because you're gospel-shaped. You believe chapters 1, 2, and 3 of Ephesians. You believe Colossians 3:13, which says, bearing with one another, and if one has complaint against another, forgiving each other. How? As the Lord has forgiven you. Whoa! Pull out the inventory. I've been walking with Jesus for 45 years. I got a long list. I have to come back to the throne of grace a lot. And we all do. Forgive as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Look, whatever I have to say about peacemaking and conflict resolution and magnanimously forgiving and showing grace is not in you to do it. Your flesh wants nothing to do with that. Take it from somebody who knows. That has to be the gospel. That has to be Jesus Christ, the grand reconciler, and forgiving, gracious, merciful Son of God who bled and died and suffered the wrath for you that just captivates your heart, overwhelms your soul. And so in the face when you and your wife sit there at the supper table and you have one of those, why did I marry you conversations? I'm so thankful we have few, so few. We make it through that because the oneness of the marriage matters. And the gospel of Jesus constrains us. There's a lot of confession and tears and repentance. The marriage in the home is the incubator of oneness that you bring to your church. If you do not have this going in your home, you're going to be hard-pressed to have it going in your church. It has to apply across multiple spheres. Ken Sandy, my mentor, and who wrote the foreword to my book, I'd have never gotten in the door at Baker without Ken reaching his kids, So thankful for the brother. His book, The Peacemaker, is a gazillion times better than mine. I commend it to you 100%. Just a must read. He says, overlooking is not a passive process, and you peacemakers like me have to watch this, in which you simply remain silent for the moment, but file away the offense for later use against someone. That's actually a form of denial that can easily lead to brooding over the offense and building up internal bitterness and resentment that will eventually explode in anger. Instead, overlooking is an active process that's inspired by God's mercy through the gospel. To truly overlook an offense means to deliberately decide not to talk about it, dwell on it, or let it grow up into pent-up bitterness. I could give you illustrations about this, but they would make me look good and the other person look bad. So I'm not going to do that. But I am going to give you an illustration about the fact of, well, how do you know when you can't do this? You can't overlook. Pastor Poirier, the Peacemaking Pastor, offers a two-pronged assessment. Ask yourself two questions. Is the offense so egregious that it harms the person or others? Can't overlook that. Have to address and deal with that. And two, does the offense begin to make a difference in your relationship? So here's my little story. Shortly before I left our Lady of Grace, we had a massive conflict about music. There was all sorts of extra interview games that were written about this is not needs improvement, and we were losing numbers, and my elders were getting very antsy about this. They were saying in a board meeting, it has to change, so on and so forth. And long story short, we finally called a meeting of the whole worship team to try to deal with it, and I got an email. I call them emails from somebody who used to be on the worship team but has stepped down because of the conflict, and it said, I've been waiting for you to step up and lead. I construed that as, I'm not dealing with it. I did the denial thing. And for months, I had a way of staying on the opposite side of the auditorium from him. Until I finally manned up and we addressed it. He said, I was complimenting you. Thank you could have said thank you. That would have helped. You stepped up and led. I've been waiting for you to do that. Miscommunication is often at the heart of conflict. But I was overlooking when I thought there was a problem when I shouldn't have been. Does that make sense? So you have to confront. Sometimes you have to engage. Point 2, engage others lovingly whenever you must. Great little book by Douglas Stone and others called Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. They nailed the challenge here. Delivering a difficult message is like throwing a hand grenade. Anybody ever pitch one of those? Or have someone pitch them to you? Coated with sugar, thrown hard or soft, a hand grenade is still going to do damage. Try as you may, there's no way to throw a hand grenade with tact or to outrun the consequences. And keeping it to yourself is no better. Choosing not to deliver a difficult message is like hanging onto the hand grenade once you pull the pin. I love that imagery. So if you feel stuck, we need advice that is more powerful than be diplomatic. Try to be positive. The problems run deeper than that, so must the answers. The problems, they do run deeper, but the answers are deep as well in a place like Galatians 6:1. Back to the New Testament, Paul's epistle to the church of Galatian church, chapter 6, verse 1. Brothers, we're family, right? For he's your pastor, he's your brother. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. My goodness, so much here in one verse. 4 things. Remember your aim in a difficult conversation. If you think someone sinned against you or someone else, what's the word picture here? Ensnared, right? Caught in a bear trap, transgression. Your goal is not the vent, not the pontificate, not the judge. Your goal is to restore. And I put the picture up of a fisherman mending his net because in the Gospels, the same word used here is used for, in a literal form, mending a fishing net, taking what's been torn and putting it back together. That's what peacemaking is so much about. So you keep in mind that person's best interest, as Philippians 2, 3, and 4 says, not just your own. You're on a mission of love. 2, walk in the Spirit. You who are spiritual. Offenses trigger the flesh, especially outbursts of anger. Galatians 5:20, you must work them through, particularly if the offense is to you, before you get to the difficult conversation. You pray, you prepare, you ask the Lord to fill you with the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, to keep you in step with the Spirit. You're relying on the vertical when you do the horizontal. 3rd, be gentle. My kingdom for this word at Trinity. Believers in Jesus have been some of the harshest people I've ever encountered. Gentleness. So many other texts I can take you to. Don't have time. You who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness that guards you from the dreaded handwriting effect. Gentle. Kid loves are in order when you're taking a soul's welfare into your hands. Here's the number one thing I do whenever I have to do this. I lead with a question, not a judgment. When you enter a difficult conversation with, you were so unkind when you said or did that thing. You pin them back on their heels, the hair goes up if they have any on the back of their head, and they're ready to fight, right? Don't do that. Ask a question like, I'm so grateful, brother, that we were able to the other day. You know that thing that happened a couple of weeks ago, that conversation, that event? I admit, I've been having a hard time with it, and I probably don't have all the pieces to the puzzle, so I'm wondering if you would help me. What was going on there from your perspective? What was that about? That's a gentleness. Draw out the heart. Create a partner. You can't control everything, obviously. But Romans 12:18 says, so far as it depends upon you, be at peace with everyone, right? So I commend to you that kind of a question. And finally, this is so important, inventory your own contribution. By the way, whenever I do conflict coaching and mediation, I always assume there's sin on both sides. I work both sides of the street. Listen, I've never seen it where it's not that way, and I've done a lot of this. And you may have sinned in a conflict, however small, but it has affected the situation. So what's Jesus' assignment to you in Matthew chapter 7? Don't judge, right? Every non-Christian's favorite verse to quote. Don't judge lest you yourself be judged. Same measure when it happened to you. Why do you presume to take the speck out of your brother's eye when there's a railroad tie? That's an Idaho Devised Standard Version. a log, a railroad tie in your own eye, first pluck that out. Then you'll see clearly to take the little speck out of your brother's eye. What? Talk about first, last, first. You know how the Lord lets you turn everything on its head. Start with you. You may only be 20% guilty of offense and sin and conflict. The other person may have the 80. You are 100% responsible for your 20%. You do the math? You may only be responsible for 20%, but you are 100% responsible. So here's how that goes. When you finally sit down to have that conversation, thank you so much for being willing to meet with me. I know this isn't easy. I've been looking into my own heart, and I believe the Lord has convicted me that when I said what I said, I was impatient, I hurt you, and I realized I damaged our oneness. I'm sorry. Would you please forgive me? And you have all the time you have to take from your end to feel safe with me again. I really want that. A robust, not an abortive confession. If you weren't so unruly that day, I would have never said. It's not helpful. A robust, legitimate, humble admission of fault. A preemptive apology. I can't tell you how many times that's helped close the gap for me with a brother and sister. Do a log inspection before a speck. All right. Overlook magnanimously whenever you can. Engage lovingly whenever you must. Now, 3, mediate disputes effectively, strategically, whenever you do. And here's where I'm going to take this to another level, because I've been praying. Jan and I have been praying, knowing that the Lord was affording this opportunity, that somebody, maybe a handful of covenant members in this church are resonating in a unique way with this and saying, I really want to own that, and I want to help others. Because peacemaking is about both doing your own conflict redemptively, but helping others to resolve theirs. And that may be behind that word peacemaker in Matthew 5:9, the only time the Greek word is used in the New Testament. It's a both and, not an either or. And I'm just bold enough to come in here and blaze the guns and say, some of you should step up and own that, so that when there's conflict in a marriage between roommates in the church, they don't have to all go to your elders, to your leaders. There might even be a team, a peacemaking, reconciling team that's well-trained under the authority of the elders and coached by them, that the people of the church should know that that's where you start. Because it is labor and time intensive to do this. Let's look at the text. Philippians chapter 4, 2 and 3. Philippians chapter 4, 2 and 3. Are you with me? You hanging in there? I know I'm making you work hard, but we're heading for the finish line. Ephesians 4, 2 and 3. I entreat Euodia, and I entreat, a double entreat, sympathy to agree in the Lord. Yes, I ask you also, true companion, help these women who have labored side by side with me in the gospel, together with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. How about that? Euodia, sympathy, side by side with Paul in the ministry, names written in the book of life, not talking to each other in the church. They need help agreeing with one another. Hey, reality check. Other people do things. Paul and Barnabas, right? Acts chapter 15. It was how did the ESV put it? It was a serious, it was a straight, it was a strong disagreement. Help me? Sharp, that's the word, thank you. Sharp disagreement. They parted ways over John Mark. It happened. Here we have another incident of this. Two women, rock stars, one of my favorite labels. They're in a dispute. We don't know what it was about. Imagine reading the letter that day at Philippi. You know how these were read publicly? Maybe it's Epaphroditus. Going through, they reach to chapter 4, and he goes, help. There's Euodia, there's Syntyche. They would be on opposite sides of the room, right? Or maybe Euodia would have been back in childcare, so she didn't have to be near Syntyche. But Paul calls them out. I entreat, I beg, I plead. Probably had Ephesians 4:3 in his head. That these two women would be agreeing in the Lord. And they're not getting it done alone. And that happens sometimes. You try all you can, and personally, and you have to get help. That's what Matthew 18:15 says. If your brother sins against you, go and talk to him in private. Amazes to me how many people I've tried to coach that have a problem with somebody and they talk to everybody else except the person that has been the cause of the offense. But when that talk to the person, you might have a miscommunication like I have. When that fails, you take, right, verse 16, one or two others with you, that every fact may be confirmed. And so this true companion now, okay, not everybody takes this way. I've landed here. True companion, I think, is a euphemism for the person that's acknowledged it might have been Epaphroditus in this church as a conflict resolver, a mediator who helps lead people to agreement about their conflict. Now, I'm insane to make this point 3. A whole message should be about how to help and mediate. A whole conference. Again, I'm going here because I really want to leave you with the challenge that some of you will own this so much that, and with this seed, it will grow into a plant and a fruitful tree of such a culture of peace that's so in your blood, that's so grafted into your DNA, that you've had a group of people that said, that's my mission at Crosswalk. How do you serve? I play the flute, beautiful, piano, I do ushering, I read. I'm a reconciler. You go, what? I help people with their conflict. Whoa. And Ken Sandy can help with that in RW360. There's a great course online you can take. Peacemakers Ministries has a boatload of options. If you don't own the DVD curriculum, Resolving Everyday Conflict, I strongly urge you to get a hold of it. It is Peacemaking 101. It takes you to the 4 Gs. It's interactive. We would use it every 3 years in our scope and sequence at Orlando Grace, and every new member got a theology of peacemaking that was a part of our core values. Wherever you are, just kick it up a notch is what I'm pleading. But I will say this one thing before I finish. Nothing helps more, other than prayer, of course, in helping others with their conflict. Nothing helps more than to hit them alone, separately, and coach them up about the conflict before you hit them together in a room. And here is your goal. See, conflict is about opposing positions, right? I got this goal. I want a brand new Jeep Wrangler to drive around Idaho with a 4-wheel drive, kick it up, motor, beautiful vehicle. And Jan says, are you crazy, dude? I want a Beater for that purpose that is probably 3rd or 4th generation that we can pay for cash. And here we are. This is imaginary, okay? This is not happening. I would have asked permission, all right? I'm hypothesizing. So it has always been my dream to own a Jeep Wrangler Laredo, and I'm trying to whittle her down by the suggestion here. So that's the conflict, right? I've got my want, she has her want. Here's where coaching comes in. I want to know what's going on in that heart that makes her so firm. There's no way you're buying a Jeep Wrangler, cowboy. We're not going to the saving trip. Why is she adamant about that? And is it a good reason, anchored in godly aspirations, or like my Wrangler is about my image in gun-toting, horse riding, lariat twirling Idaho? I'm going to tell you, it took me 6 months to get used in an open carry state to half the men in my congregation with semi-automatic pistols right here. Not in the waistband behind the coat. It's like, Pastor, are you sure you want to teach that? Man, it's about image. And I'm 67. I broke a rib 5 weeks ago, tripping over a railroad tie in the dark. Who is this guy from the tropics? So, but what's that about? That's about an idol. Men with a love for new vehicles, beware, right? Not that a woman can't have that too, but. And so James 4, 1 and 2. Last text I'm going to take you to and we're done. You've been so patient. James 4. Terribly important text that comes along with peacemaking and particularly with helping people with their conflict. Right? James 4, 1 and 2. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? Good things, probably, often, that become God things that turn into bad things. Good things, God things, bad things. Is it not those you desire and you do not have, so you murder? Probably not homicide literally. But Proverbs says, harsh words are like sword thrusts. Wounds galore. Come with this thing. You desire to have to, you murder, you covet, you cannot obtain, so you fight, and quarrel you do not have, because you do not ask. My go-to question in helping. Last tip. What's the worst thing? I said this to, let's say Jane and I are working with a married couple. We're approaching them independently. That's how we approach it. I ask this question invariably. If this thing goes south, it turns out badly, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? I inevitably hit at something in the heart. Some core fear, desire to control, need to possess. You're looking for those because they are the bread and butter of conflict. So, my best illustration, and I'm finished. I almost didn't publish. You can put the picture up if you would, Chris. That word is, my wife does not like this analogy, but it felt like birthing a baby. What guy really knows? That's like. But it was one of the hardest things I ever did, in part because I lost Nancy to cancer. She went to be with a better man. I can say that now. Lied me about it. She knew Jesus. I led her to Christ in the day. And we had 41 and a half years, wonderful years together. I lost her. Josh had just gone away. And then my jaw fractured. And I went through all those surgeries, and I'm trying to finish this thing. And at the end, I almost didn't submit it. Just before, it was to go to the publisher for the editors to rip it to shreds and make it a whole lot better. we had this conflict I mentioned about